Hello, dear friends, and welcome back to Earthly Delights. If you love the quiet joy of houseplants, the promise of a backyard garden, the beauty of raised beds, or simply the feeling of turning ordinary kitchen scraps into something alive and beautiful, then you are in exactly the right place today. Have you ever really thought about what happens the very moment a root meets the soil? Most people picture the harvest first, the heavy tomatoes warming in the sun, the crisp cucumbers, the flowers bursting into color. But long before any of that appears, something invisible begins underground. That hidden world is where real success starts. After years of working with garden soil, compost, organic materials, and long-term plant care, I can tell you this with confidence. Strong plants do not begin with expensive products. They begin with a healthy foundation. And today, that is exactly what we are talking about. Beginnings. Because in gardening, just like in life, the way you begin shapes everything that follows. What if the secret to healthier, more resilient plants was not in a store-bought bottle or a costly synthetic fertilizer? What if two of the most useful things you could add to your planting hole are already in your kitchen, usually tossed away without a second thought? So before you plant anything this season, before you set that young seedling into the ground, pause with me for a moment. In this video, we are going to look at two completely free ingredients that can help transform the soil right at the root zone. And when you use them the right way, you are not just feeding a plant, you are helping build a living ecosystem that supports growth from the ground up. If that sounds like the kind of practical, natural gardening wisdom you want more of, make sure you subscribe to Earthly Delights and join me as we dig into the simple secret hiding beneath your feet. Part 1. The magic beneath our feet, rethinking the planting hole. Before we can understand why these two simple ingredients matter so much, we need to change the way we think about a planting hole. For a long time, many people were taught to treat the garden almost like a machine. Put the plant in, add fertilizer, wait for production, and move on. But if you've spent real time working with healthy soil, you learn very quickly that nature does not operate like a factory. It operates like a living system. A planting hole is not just an empty space where a seedling waits to survive. It is a small but powerful ecosystem, a highly active zone where roots, moisture, air, microbes, fungi, and organic matter all begin working together. This is the rhizosphere, the living world that surrounds the roots, and it plays an enormous role in how well a plant settles in, how fast it grows, and how resilient it becomes over time. If you think about it, plants are not so different from people. When you begin a new chapter in life, your success depends on the environment around you. It depends on support, stability, and access to the right resources. A young plant needs the same kind of strong beginning. That is why experienced gardeners have always said, feed the soil, not the plant. When the soil is alive, the plant has a far better chance to thrive. And when we enrich that planting hole with the right natural materials, we do much more than add nutrients. We activate biology. We invite beneficial microbes, helpful fungi, and hardworking earthworms to gather right where the roots need them most. In other words, we begin building an underground community from day one. And the first step in building that living foundation starts with a familiar kitchen leftover most people throw away without a second thought. Part 2. Ingredient number 1. The morning brew's second life. The first ingredient is something many of us touch every single morning without realizing its value in the garden. Used coffee grounds. Every day, huge amounts of coffee grounds end up in the trash, even though they can be incredibly useful in the soil when used the right way. In gardening and composting, spent coffee grounds are often considered a green material, meaning they contribute nitrogen-rich organic matter. And nitrogen, as many gardeners know, is essential for healthy leafy growth. It supports chlorophyll production, which is what gives plants that rich, vibrant green color and helps fuel early vegetative development. Now, this is the point where many gardeners hesitate because one myth has been repeated for years, that coffee grounds are too acidic and will damage your plants. But used coffee grounds are very different from fresh ground coffee. Most of the acidity in coffee is water-soluble, which means much of it ends up in the brewed cup, not in the leftover grounds. Once the coffee has been brewed, the used grounds are usually much closer to neutral than people expect, so they are not likely to dramatically shift soil pH when added in modest amounts. What matters even more is how they work. Coffee grounds do not act like a fast chemical fertilizer. They do not deliver an instant burst of nutrition the moment they hit the soil. Instead, they become part of a slower, more natural feeding process. The nitrogen in them is tied up in organic compounds, and those compounds need to be broken down by bacteria and fungi before the plant can really use them. That is exactly why they fit so well into a healthy garden system. This is one of the most important lessons good soil teaches us. Lasting growth is rarely instant. In a world that constantly pushes speed and quick results, the garden reminds us that steady support often matters more than sudden force. When you place a few tablespoons of used coffee grounds into the planting hole, you are not chasing a shortcut. You are creating a slow, dependable source of nourishment that supports the seedling through one of the most vulnerable stages of its life. And when that quiet support is paired with the right mineral partner, the results become even more powerful. Part 3, ingredient number 2, the fragile armor. If coffee grounds provide the energy, then our second ingredient brings the structure. Ingredient number 2 is eggshells. At first glance, eggshells may not look like much, but they hold real value in the garden. They are made mostly of calcium carbonate, and they also contain small amounts of important trace minerals such as iron, copper, zinc, and manganese. Calcium in particular plays a major role in plant health because it helps strengthen cell walls and supports steady, well-formed growth. In simple terms, it helps plants build strong tissue from the inside out. But this is where we need to clear up another gardening myth that has confused people for years. Many gardeners have heard that tossing crushed eggshells into the planting hole will instantly prevent blossom end rot in tomatoes. That is the frustrating problem where the bottom of the fruit turns dark, sunken, and rotten. It sounds simple enough. Add more calcium and fix the problem. But in real garden conditions, it usually does not work that way. If you only crush eggshells loosely with your hands and scatter them into the soil, they can remain there for years, breaking down very slowly and releasing very little usable calcium in the short term. And even more importantly, blossom end rot is often not caused by a true lack of calcium in the soil. In many cases, the real issue is uneven watering. Calcium moves through the plant with water, so when moisture levels swing too much, the plant may struggle to deliver calcium where it is needed most, especially to developing fruit. So if we want eggshells to be genuinely helpful, we need to prepare them properly. After rinsing and drying them well, grind them into a very fine powder. The finer the particles, the greater the surface area, and the easier it becomes for soil life to work on them and release calcium into the soil solution more efficiently. That is how you unlock their real value. And there is something meaningful in that process too. Sometimes the things that seem hard and unbreakable only become useful after they are broken down. In the garden, even a fragile shell can become a source of strength when handled with care. And once that mineral strength joins the steady biological support of coffee grounds, the two begin to work together in a much more powerful way than either could alone. Part 4, the synergistic dance, amplification over addition. So now we have both pieces, the used coffee grounds and the finely powdered eggshells. The next question is simple: why use them together? Because this is where gardening becomes more than adding ingredients. This is where it becomes about synergy. In a healthy planting hole, these two kitchen scraps do not just sit side by side and perform separate jobs. They support one another. And when that happens, the result is greater than either one could produce on its own. The coffee grounds help feed the biological life in the soil. They encourage bacteria and fungi to get to work breaking down organic matter and building activity around the root zone. That biological movement matters because living soil is what makes nutrients more available over time. At the same moment, the powdered eggshells provide a deeper mineral base, especially calcium, that can gradually enter the soil system as those natural processes continue. In other words, one ingredient energizes the workers, and the other supplies the building materials. The biology stimulated by the coffee grounds helps create the conditions that make the mineral content of the eggshells more useful to the plant. That is the beauty of combining them. You are not just feeding roots directly, you are supporting the entire network that helps roots function better. This is the kind of partnership that good gardeners learn to respect. Soil is not improved by force alone. It improves when organic matter, minerals, moisture, microbes, and time begin working in balance. And once that balance starts forming beneath the surface, another quiet helper is often drawn into the picture, one of the most valuable allies any garden can have. Part 5. The Silent Architects, Welcoming the Earthworms. And once that living partnership begins underground, something else often happens. Something quiet, natural, and incredibly valuable. When you add coffee grounds to the planting hole, you are also sending out a kind of invitation to one of the greatest helpers any gardener can have, earthworms. Earthworms are drawn to organic matter, and they are especially useful in soil that is being fed with natural materials. As they move through the ground, feeding and tunneling, they loosen compacted soil, improve aeration, and help water move more evenly through the root zone. In other words, they do the kind of steady underground work that gardeners benefit from, but rarely get to see. But the real treasure is not only in what they do while moving through the soil, it is also in what they leave behind. Worm castings are one of the finest natural soil amendments you can have in a garden. They are rich, biologically active, and full of plant-available nutrition in a form roots can use more easily. They also help support stronger root growth and contribute to overall plant vigor in a way that feels gentle, balanced, and long-lasting rather than harsh or forced. So by adding something as simple as used coffee grounds, you are not just feeding the soil directly, you are encouraging nature's own workforce to get involved. You are creating conditions where the soil begins improving itself from within, right at the place where your young plant needs help the most. And there is a lesson in that too. When you build an environment that is nourishing and alive, the right helpers often arrive on their own. Support attracts support. Life responds to life. But as we move deeper into this planting hole strategy, there is one more free ingredient some gardeners use. And this is where a lot of people get into trouble if they are not careful. The high-stakes climax, the wood ash warning. Now, some experienced growers go a step further and use a third free material from around the home. Wood ash from the fireplace or fire pit. And yes, wood ash can be useful in the garden because it contains potassium, one of the key nutrients plants rely on when they shift from leafy growth into flowering and fruit production. That sounds promising, and in the right form, it can be. But this is also the point where many gardeners make a serious mistake. If you take dry wood ash and put it directly into the planting hole or around tender roots, you can do more harm than good. Wood ash is highly alkaline, and when it comes into contact with soil moisture in a concentrated form, it can create a sudden rise in pH that stresses the root zone. That kind of shock can damage delicate feeder roots and interfere with the plant's ability to take up other nutrients properly. What was meant to help the plant can quickly begin working against it. So the answer is not to use more of it. The answer is to use it differently. Instead of applying dry ash directly, a safer method is to make a wood ash extract, sometimes called ash tea. You take clean, untreated wood ash, mix 1 cup of it into a gallon of water, stir it well, and let it sit for a few days. Over time, the water takes on a pale amber color. That liquid becomes a concentrate, and it should not be used at full strength. It needs to be diluted further, usually by adding just a small amount to a full watering can until the mixture looks like a very light tea. Used that way, it becomes much gentler. The soil can buffer it more effectively, and the dissolved potassium can move into the root zone in a form that is easier to manage, especially when the plant is approaching the stage of flowering and fruiting. And that again is a lesson the garden teaches so well. Even something powerful can become harmful when delivered without care. Strength alone is not enough. Timing matters. Balance matters. And when force is tempered by patience and good judgment, it can become something deeply beneficial. Part 7. Creating the magical formula in the whole. Now that we understand the science behind it, let's bring everything together and put it to work on planting day. When you are ready to plant, whether it is a tomato, a pepper, or even a flowering plant you want to establish well from the start, begin by digging a generous hole. And if you are planting tomatoes, go especially deep, around 6 to 8 inches if your seedling size allows it. Tomatoes are unique in the way they can form roots along buried portions of the stem, so planting them deeper gives them the chance to build a broader, stronger root system right from the beginning. This is where we create the formula that gives the plant its best possible start. Into the hole, add a blend of your native soil and rich compost. That combination matters because compost brings life, moisture balance, and microbial activity, while the native soil helps the plant adapt to the place where it will actually grow. Then add about 1 cup of worm castings to further enrich the root zone. After that, sprinkle in 2 to 3 tablespoons of your finely powdered eggshells, followed by 2 to 3 tablespoons of your used coffee grounds. Once everything is in place, mix it thoroughly at the bottom of the hole so those ingredients are not sitting in separate layers. You want them working together as one living foundation. Then set your seedling in gently, backfill with soil, and avoid pressing too hard. Roots need contact with the soil, yes, but they also need air. Finish by watering deeply so the whole zone settles in and the biological activity can begin. At that point, you have done much more than plant something in the ground. You have created the conditions for life to organize itself around that plant. You have built a starting place where roots can stretch, microbes can multiply, and the soil can begin doing what healthy soil was always meant to do. Part 8. The Harvest of Patience. Lessons from the garden to your life. And if you stay with that process, you will begin to notice the difference as the season moves forward. Your plants may look greener, steadier, and more vigorous. They may handle stress better. You may see stronger growth, healthier roots, and better overall development. But the real beauty of this kind of gardening is that the reward does not stop with one season. In the first year, the improvement may be noticeable but modest. You may see more biological activity in the soil, more worms, and stronger performance from the plants you grow. By the second year, the soil begins with a better foundation than it had before. It holds more life, more structure, and more stability. And by the third year, the change can become dramatic because everything you have been adding and encouraging has had time to build on itself. The calcium from the eggshells continues contributing to the long-term mineral reserve. Earthworm populations increase and keep working the soil for you. The coffee grounds and compost break down further and help create darker, richer organic matter. Little by little, the soil becomes more alive, more balanced, and more capable of supporting healthy growth without needing to be forced. That is one of the greatest lessons a garden can teach. Real abundance usually does not appear all at once. It builds gradually through repetition, patience, and care. The effort may seem small in the moment, but over time it compounds. And that is true not only in the soil, but in life. The small things you do consistently, your patience, your discipline, your quiet daily effort, can become the foundation for something far greater than you imagined when you first began. Conclusion. So the next time you make your morning coffee or crack a few eggs for breakfast, do not be too quick to throw those leftovers away. Save them, prepare them well, return them to the soil with purpose. One of the most beautiful things about gardening is that it constantly reminds us how much value is hidden in ordinary things. With a little knowledge and a little intention, what looks like waste can become nourishment. What seems small can become powerful, and a simple planting hole can become the beginning of a thriving, living system. Thank you so much for spending this time with me here on Earthly Delights. If this video gave you a fresh idea for your garden, or maybe even a new perspective on how growth really works, be sure to like the video, share it with someone who loves gardening, and subscribe to the channel so we can keep learning and growing together. And before you go, I would love to hear from you in the comments. What is one small habit you are planting in your life right now that you hope will grow into something beautiful over time? Until next time, keep your hands in the soil, keep your mind open, and remember, when you build healthy soil first, everything else has a better chance to flourish.